Evening, everybody. Welcome to the discussion session for November 8th, 2022. We have a nice, full, and busy agenda this evening. Start with Manager Gill. President, tonight's anticipated for the 2022 budget. We have a public hearing on the 2023 manager's recommended budget and tax rate for 2023. This is the first hearing on the budget. 13. We also have the introduction of an ordinance concerning the SF County's 2023 budget. Resolution as please. We have the introduction of an ordinance fixing the tax rate for the year 2023. Spoiler alert: changes proposed to the tax rate. Consideration of an ordinance amending the penalties of violations in Chapter 10, Part 12 of the Municipal Code of Ordinances. That's the parking violations. Andrew McCreary explained that at the last public hearing. We have the consideration of final approval for a minor subdivision plan on Livendale Drive. It's just simply a lot line revision. We also have the consideration of the execution of the agreement for creating stormwater management and erosion and sedimentation controls for property located in either. Hey, I think there's traffic in here.
So I'm back here, I guess a little over a month ago, or maybe a few agenda sessions ago, where we talked about the art traffic calming plan. From that meeting. Specifically, section. You pages. This is part of the Beverly Road intersection. Not too much here. We'll talk about this last. This is still just conceptual. It's based on some topography, obviously. Just have these faculties today, just an aerial, just to give it a look.
Crosswalk as well.
Correct. Yeah, so that intersection now, there are no more response. Any of the board 6 of it. The other. And this is something that we could talk through with them. Where they are now, they're essentially backing up into that same spot. But now they're
Property owner. is very nice.
yeah,
They're paying themselves right now. And then, yeah,
yeah, I mean, we could certainly have meetings, conversations. This, and so, uh, so I take this Ethernet, whatever, then the next step, you really involve them on the details of it.
Yeah.
So the municipality has a traffic calm policy.
Right.
And the neighbor was, I think, the first step of that process is to get a petition signed that they're interested in traffic calming because they perceive to have a problem.
Right.
So next step is if they have enough signatures, we screen it. We determine how much traffic is out there, what the speeds are. There's a couple of different locations. And then there's thresholds. If they exceed those thresholds, they qualify for moving forward with a plan.
Right.
and that happened in 2019.
Yeah, then,
Right, but then we hit the pandemic and we couldn't get accurate traffic counts because.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, but it's
So
going
there, it made
anywhere.
no sense
Yeah.
to go out and do them until we.
Right.
Yeah, so we get. In my time since 2014, we've probably had 12 to 15. This is only. It's the screening part.
Police can weigh in and say, look, doesn't
So we have to check the labor. Very good work with the recommendation. They've been involved. Location, it's, the geometry is right, it's spaced out nicely between the intersections. And each. I don't know how you decide if it's its own, and put 3 speed humps in as a project. Program.
Nobody ever upset with me like.
Yeah, so let's go. With it.
7, 8. Beautiful.
I'm paying attention to me.
Then we have a series of 2 more speed humps. One between Marlin Drive east and west, and one between McCann and Marlin Drive east or west. Here's the first one. You can see it's about 150 feet east of Marlin Drive west. That one hasn't really been a concern or a question. And then the second one, this is the existing condition. This is about where the brick and the pavement, the brick ends and the pavement starts. We're kind of right at that threshold. This one was initially a little further east, was actually closer to the driveway that you see on the bottom of Art Road, furthest to the right on the plan. That resident has reached out within the past couple of weeks with concerns about the speed hump and it's not desirable to be in front of their property. So as a result of that, we've shifted it a little further to be just outside of their property and to not impact their driveway as much. I do believe I did send this plan to the resident. I think they are still opposed to it, but ultimately the decision will be the commission's. We did remove it from being right in front of their property. So whether this one stays in or goes, I think will be a commission decision.
So we're still at either 2 or 3.
That's the question. Yeah, so we can
2 or 3.
do 2 or 3. Okay.
Correct.
Is there a cost difference given that this is so close to the brick? Or
Yeah,
does
so
it-
I have that one as 12 to 15, or as Keith would say, 15. Because I think for planning purposes, I think that's really what we should look at.
Right, so is it
Um,
cost?
Continuing westward, the McCann and Arden intersection, which we also talked about last time. This is where we talked about, it is an all-way stop. We talked about the traffic circle. The size of that circle has shrunk to accommodate fire apparatus and public works and things like that, to be able to navigate around it without being impacted or having to drive on curbs or anything like that. So we initially started with 16 feet, 16-foot offset from curb to curb. So we were at 19. This is what we presented last time as well. We went through all the turning templates last time showing, you know, that the fire trucks and everything can navigate through this. And then when we have priced at 25,000, there's a couple feet of brick restoration, new curbing and landscaping and things like that associated with that.
Is it gonna be a planted
Yes,
circle? Okay, that's what I thought I was seeing on that.
low plants, you know, flowers,
yeah,
things like that.
And then will
And
the,
lots of signage.
yeah, so it'll be dirt on top of what underneath? Will we
Dirt.
excavate? Okay,
Yeah,
dirt all
we'll
the way
pull
through.
all the brick out and
All
all
the
that
brick
stuff.
out
And
and all
then
that
fill it
stuff.
with
Save,
dirt and topsoil.
save,
Okay,
so we can have it for other streets, save all the.
Then
save the brick.
How it guys.
just that I was able to kind of pull those last three together on an aerial. So there's your McCann on the left side there, Marlin Drive west in the middle, Marlin Drive east on the right. So just to give some context of where those speed humps would show up aerially in context with the homes and driveways, you can see where those two are. And then that is a 2-scale circle in there. So that's essentially, if, you know, a couple years from now, you pull up a Google Earth and it goes in at that size, it's going to look like that. But maybe with some more color than green.
Any chance we can see a price at making it instead of concrete at the edge, brick at the edge, or include some brick in that design?
I don't know that your brick's gonna give you the stability to hold the remaining brick in place. I think it does need to be, and again, I'm not an engineer, so I should be quiet, but I think that you're gonna need the concrete to
Yeah, maybe that's the base, but
maintain the integrity of
Yeah.
the road itself.
My fingers aren't working.
some brick decor.
Would you
Okay.
need it? I mean, it's a street thing. You know, I wouldn't worry about it.
Plans it up, make it look nice that way.
Plan it.
Did you want to do a sound check, make sure the residents getting better?
I'm hearing it's better,
Yeah.
but maybe, is there a way to ask real time anybody, or there's no panelists online? Yeah.
So somebody texted you. text
Yeah,
back.
and they said it's better.
Audio is better.
Okay, thank
There you
you.
go. Thank you.
Nice.
You know, really struggling here, Josh.
It's horrible. Because what this is the one that comes on Copper Road.
Way in your house.
Yeah, and none of my keyboard's not working, which has the mouse on it. It's not working.
Okay. This is so- this is
Am I? 'Cause I'm just scrolling in and out. I can't see
I like
my
your
finger
design.
where.
This seems.
Maybe if I do that. I want to go to the.
Well, I mean, you got a keyboard.
Yes, keyboard. My keyboard is dead.
Yeah. Right. Any of those?
No,
I'm getting close.
Okay.
So the two.
If I could ask the question, have any concerns about what you saw so far?
Yes.
Yay. All right, I got a keyboard that works. Okay, let's go back to Arden over there.
I've had the benefit of reviewing this with Mike already, so that's,
Yeah.
you guys have
Yeah, yeah.
anything,
No, we're just
speak up.
I just got an email. I guess the sound is good now.
good.
All right, so this was the initial concept that was presented to the draft board and to the neighbors. And what it included was, it might be not clear because it's a type of a plan. But what it included was a raised, essentially a raised island in the middle, because the roadway is very wide between the offset
Right.
Arden Road. So it's about 30 feet wide curb to curb. Once you get out of that offset area, it's back to 24 feet. So we have this kind of 30-foot wide, 6-foot
Mhm.
wasted area there that's being used for the people that are using to go from Arden to Arden, or kind of cutting through here at a 45-degree angle so that they can go faster. They're not really making a left turn and a right turn. They're kind of just going through at an S, or a very straightened out S.
Yeah.
So we wanted to physically force and delineate where we want the vehicles to travel. Now, with the raised island, there were concerns, obviously, with fire trucks being able to make that S-turn movement. They wouldn't be able to. Essentially, they would have to jump the curb, and that's problematic for the equipment. And then also, you know, there are potential issues with plowing and snow events and things like that. But I think, you know, that those things can be worked around by adjusting routes and things like that. So the question became, well, you know, is it a safety issue with not having, having a fire truck not being able to make that movement? I think the question probably is more, in an emergency, would a fire truck make that movement? So if a fire truck was coming to a house on Arden west of Overlook, are they gonna come onto Arden off of Beverly and up through the neighborhood to make this movement? Or are they gonna we're likely gonna stay on Beverly, where they've got emergency vehicle preemptions at the signals, and then they're gonna go up Marlin east or west, or wherever they're trying to head. If they're gonna go back, to Parker or something like that, they're likely gonna come to Overlook and go straight through. They obviously can do. So is there a need for that in an emergency for a fire truck to make that movement? That's, I think, That's one of the questions that you guys would have to determine. That's the issue with the raise. So when we came here last month or a month ago, month and a half ago, we presented to you and via this meeting, essentially doing that same thing with just pavement markings. So you're gonna see the same delineation, but there's no physical restriction that would, force a motorist who's gonna make this movement to stay within those lines. They essentially, once they realize what's happening, if they're using this as a cut through or whatever they're using it for, they'll probably just start cutting it through there again across the pavement markings. We can define for them what we want them to do, but without a physical restriction, are they all going to do it? It's unlikely.
Not as much of a deterrent.
It's not as much of a deterrent. So we went back based on input from the commission and from the residents, I believe, that showed up, that came to the regular meeting last month. And I think they're all want to go back to the raised median. So we went back and looked at what other options are that we looked at things like a raised crosswalk here. Geometrically, the offset isn't enough because the raised crosswalk itself has a 6 foot plateau on the top, and then it has 6 to 10 foot ramps on each side. So you would end up with, by the time you came down, you would only tie back in here, which kind of leaves you in this no man's land over here, and being able to get that to tie in, and it just doesn't work. There's not enough of a tangent section between the curbs there. There was discussion through some emails today about one way. What if this were made a one way? That was something that was evaluated back with the neighborhood and with the traffic board, and it clearly would have caused more problems on Parker and New Bern. And then also, when you make a 24 foot wide roadway one way, you actually increase the speeds because now you don't have traffic opposing you. So there were a lot of negatives to that. It was kind of a non-starter for the neighborhood, as one-way roads mostly are. So we did evaluate that. What I came up with was kind of a hybrid of option 1 and 2. So there's some physical component to it, but it also allows or would allow for the navigation through here of an emergency vehicle if it had to come through here. Let me zoom in a little bit here. So essentially, we would create this same island with concrete. We would excavate out the pavement, and we would put in 10-inch concrete, and the concrete, the lines that you're seeing in here actually, or they're extruded, it would be a rumble strip type of concrete. So you see a lot of these medians that have rumble strips on them in driveways to commercial developments. Sheets does them all the time because they need to have a driveway that's wider for their trucks, but then they want the cars to kind of stay in the lanes they want to stay in. So there's precedent for this type of a median. So it is physically there. It's concrete. It does have the rumble strips on it with the paint. The paint that would be directing the vehicles with the dashed yellows would be exactly the same. But the one component that we would add that has pros and cons, but the pros would be that it would be a physical deterrent for your normal passenger vehicle that wants to make this movement, is we would put 3 flexible delineators around the outsides of these. And if I go down into the corner, we call them candlesticks, but essentially
The spikes.
they're
These posts.
Posts.
but they're flexible, and they're not metal. They're not embedded into the ground. So the base of it is 3 inches high, 4 inches high. That is embedded or bolted into the concrete, and then the delineator itself is just pinned on a hinge. So you can almost see kind of like the hinge in the bottom here, so that a person could physically go out and just push it over.
Yeah.
And then you could pick it back up. Okay.
What's it made out of?
It's like a very hard, durable plastic. Yeah. The city of Pittsburgh is using them everywhere.
Okay.
That's what they're separating all their bike lanes from the travel lanes. I mean, they're all through Oakland. They're all over the place. If you drive through there, you're going to see a lot of them are knocked down. They do get hit. So that's
the con.
That's
They
the
don't
con.
last.
The con is they're going to get knocked down. Someone is going to have to, deal with.
Replace
And then once they're hit, they go down. I mean, so it's not like they spring back up.
They
right
don't
again.
spring back up.
You know, if someone drives up, they're flat.
Yeah.
Until.
But there, you know, somebody on the metal, there's no, yeah, no. You know what, essentially, they're, you know, you'll see those over time being run over like you do the panels that they put in the middle of the road that says you have a pedestrian to crosswalk, that they don't last super long because eventually there's someone gonna hit it or not see it, destroy it. It's kind of a hybrid. It does create that visual and physical barrier or delineator, if you will, that is going to make your typical vehicular movement through here. You know, they're going to have to go around it as opposed to driving over it.
Like other than the delineators, is the rest of it flush to the pavement surface?
Yeah, so this is an at-grade concrete island that's got rumble strips through it.
But you've got it smooth.
But it's-
middle
but
for
it's-
the crosswalk.
Yeah, and it's smooth in the middle for the crosswalk, but it's obviously more permanent than paint.
Yeah.
The paint's gonna wear, the paint probably lends itself more to driving over than something that has a little bit of a different feel and a different texture and a different context than just painted asphalt.
What's the bulk of the issue in this intersection? It's just the cut through traffic that are.
There's a lot of pedestrians walk to school, walk to Beverly. It's 1 block from Beverly and 2 blocks from Lincoln Elementary School. And the cars are coming at it at a diagonal at speed. And so if you stop before the intersection, you stop before the intersection, but then there's no more stopping. So then you just gun it and go through at a diagonal.
Yeah, and right now,
Not seeing that.
I mean, can we hit part of it by putting a no left on one of those streets? I mean, it seems like a pretty low tech option there. I mean,
Yeah,
we've got those all over in the 4th Ward on Scott on roads, you know, before Broadmoor, and, you know, those are, I mean, I'm on those roads all day long and people follow those signs. I mean, seems like a pretty low tech option there.
it's a pretty heavy volume that's doing that, so.
But if that no left turn sign is there, that cuts the issue of where the traffic would be, where the residents are.
I mean, like, I think about, you know, going to Scott and say, no left, I'm going to Broadmoor, make left. But I have an option. I don't know here, I'm not living on those streets, if so, I have to go all the way to X street before finally get to my driveway.
But these are the trade-offs, right? If we're establishing that there is in fact a safety issue, that is a remedy. So the question becomes, do we offset the safety issue with residents' concerns of convenience? This is the conversation we're having,
Yeah.
right? So part of it is, you know, do you factor convenience over safety? The answer might very well be yes. But I think that's part of the conversation.
Yeah, and on that, we talked about doing a one-way overlook, but it was one way in the direction that you're saying not to do it several years ago because of the overlook parking lot that's down there that you can't see on that.
Straight that way.
And so we want to direct cars this way into the parking lot, and that's just been redone, and it's a nice parking lot. We
Yeah, and I'm not saying make it
that.
that way, I'm saying just make it no left.
So then
from one of
cars
the streets.
go down there, to get into the parking lot, which is what we want.
Is that the only area where the traffic is a concern?
Where's
Is
traffic coming from?
Arden
Is it
the other
coming
way?
from Arden, from Cochran?
Both.
Traffic coming from.
Both?
Yeah, it's essentially from Beverly to Cochran. And it's not, this isn't the only,
Oh, no, I know. I mean,
I mean, it's,
I'm familiar with the shortcut, so to speak. Seen it, been there, done that.
I mean, to Commissioner Burrell's question, your question, the point was, it's too bad the fire department's not here to say, would they just kind of say, like, when waves tell you the way to get from point A to point B, and he said, we just make the left to the right in such place instead of.
Well, if you put a no left turn sign up and the fire department's responding to an emergency.
No, I'm not talking about, I'm just talking about to say, if the fire department says, rather than my taking Arden Road to get to the fire, I will take Overlook to get to the fire or something else. So that I don't have to worry about going through that intersection, no left turn sign, just that they readjust their route.
What is the traffic through there, right? Presumably we've got traffic numbers, right? From Arden onto Overlook from both directions.
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but this whole neighborhood actually received points for volume.
Right, it's
Oh, I
elevated
bet.
because of its area, right,
Yeah,
yeah.
So it is a point.
Are there action items that you need from us? I'm just recognizing the time.
Yeah, not necessarily, I mean,
Pick one, we have to pick
it's,
one.
yeah, at some point, this has to come to to a regular meeting
Okay.
for you guys to make a decision on implementation of this plan.
Okay,
Implement it, don't implement it, implement part of it, change some of it, send it back to the traffic board. I mean, there's a whole litany of things that you.
so there are three options.
I'm trying to make sure, yeah,
1, 2, 3.
we've come up with three viable options based on what we've observed and what we've analyzed out here and what the neighbors like.
Okay.
Yeah,
All of which have pros and cons.
well, as I had said previously, I think my only question on this one, I personally prefer that first example, right? The one that has the full island. Because I do believe that it is more safe from a pedestrian perspective. And the reality is that once this is done, we're not going to look at it for another 30 or 40 years. So let's do it right now. The question in my mind is, if it's an emergency vehicle travel plan, right? What are their travel plans now versus what would their travel plans need to be, in a future scenario? It might not change their times. They just need to rethink their drive patterns to get to the locations. That's an ask that,
We
we
can
have
ask
to.
them to do that
Right.
right now.
Again, I mean, if they say it's gonna add 5 minutes, clearly that it's not the right answer. But if they say it's gonna add 3 seconds, because we've shifted from, because we're all coming from, the public safety building, and we're going in that direction, we can go one of 4 other ways.
Yeah.
Then let's prioritize pedestrian safety.
I would support that approach.
I mean, like, so generally I agree, but just, so like, another issue, and maybe it's a small issue that I have, is with the figure 3C, which has, is that the rumble strip one or is that 3B?
That's.
Yeah,
There's that.
Three
And then
tiers.
this one's the one.
Yeah,
That's the one you're worried
yeah, this
about.
one, yeah, so figure
3B.
3B is the one that, so like, it just creates a really weird angle. So like, right, because right now, nothing is there. So when residents make that left turn from Arden onto Overlook, they're kind of making up for the fact that there's no lines, and they're heading into the Overlook traffic. But with that island, we're kind of artificially forcing them into a weird angle that they then have to readjust on Overlook.
Yeah, so maybe, so you see the kind of the light gray that's around this?
Yeah,
That's not actually the island, that's
Mhm.
just two foot of reconstruction of the roadway to facilitate the construction of the curve. So the
Okay.
curves are actually the white
Mhm.
inside of it.
Oh, that's not as big.
Right, it's because my guys want to make it look like an engineered plan. It's not a.
But if you draw a center line down, Overlook on the lane heading south, right?
Mhm.
If you're on Overlook on the northern side heading south, you can't get from, well, maybe you can't get from there now either. Is there a straight line on the southbound lane on Overlook?
No, it's already offset.
It is offset.
Yeah.
It's a mess.
Yes, because it's 24 feet here, and then in the middle, it's 30 feet, and it's 24 feet here, but these two curb lines, if you extend them out, they don't match these two curb lines. You're already,
yeah,
It's
I
off.
can see.
yeah. So and that's why we were adding the tracers, because the tracers really define where you're gonna go. And you can also see on here that this is where the stop bar is now and the stop sign. And that was another thing that I changed on the last one, the
Pull it
stop
out.
bar,
Yeah,
pull it
pull
up.
it out,
So
yeah.
now your vehicle stops here.
Right.
When they were stopping here, they were basically just coming right through like this.
Sure.
Or even cutting this corner to go straight
Yeah.
down on Overlook. So this brings them up to the intersection. And now we're defining, you're making a left turn if you're gonna go south.
Right.
And if you're making a left turn and making a right turn to go west. So what's happening is everyone's doing this now.
Yeah.
And this is a crossing guard here. It's very heavily pedestrian traveled because of the offset. even when a guard's not there, there's a lot of pedestrians across there.
You said hundreds a day, right?
Yeah, so it's, that's the issue that's been identified that we're,
So if you do 3B or 3C, you'd still pull the stop bars out, right?
yes, correct.
Making sure.
Are we able to get a temperature of the room or is commission?
The risk of sounding like a politician, on pro safety, pedestrian safety, and a pro fire. So I think the question is back to, if there's way to be both pro pedestrian safety and pro fire. Is what I think both Commissioner Flynn and our favorite engineer has said, that let's talk to the fire department, see if they take a different travel path. Hopefully it doesn't take significantly longer. If the fire department's cool with a slightly different route, then we can go with the more aggressive figure for D and boy,
Yeah.
this intersection. But I just felt there's a piece of information we don't have yet.
So our preference sounds like the concrete, and if we can't get concrete, we like the rumble next,
That would be my second choice. yes.
rumble second, and then painted is third. Is that true? Okay,
So I could follow up with fire with that question. I will tell you that there's one variable in there. They can obviously give you the impacts to response time based on a response from 555. What will be more of a variable will be if they are out on another call,
Yeah.
they're coming from a different direction.
Sure.
But again, we'll take the majority of those calls originating from,
Is it
555.
east and west?
Right. It just depends on where they are in town in terms of.
Sure.
and then you'll send that information over email to the
I will
commission.
email copy the commission.
Yeah,
So that you will be copied on.
okay, and we don't maybe have to have this back on discussion.
I don't think it has to be back to discussion. I think it could be,
Great.
the next time can be on whatever your next.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we will have the, like, you don't think. Three C, which is the new one. The rumble strips.
Yeah, 3C is the new 3A.
So I'll need a number there.
Yeah, that one, I have like 7,000 to 30,000.
I was gonna say, just for those of you scoring at home, without this particular intersection here, somewhere between 110 to 125,000, depending on whether or not we do that at $15,000 fee.
Yep, my range was 110 to 155.
And will some of that be able to be added on this year's budget if we want to?
Well, that's why I'm asking the question now, because there's a conversation that will in the budget conversations. But I would tell you that you've got, again, somewhere between 110 to 125,000 dollars of known costs now, right?
People
The
get
things-
circle.
Everything else that we're not, so it's going back and forth on, so
And what's our carryover funds for fiber comm?
we're probably gonna have a carryover somewhere around 20,000.
20,000. Okay. A little something.
You'll need to allocate additional funds.
So we need something. Maybe some of the speed bumps can be included in some of the street reconstruction costs.
So we'd have to look at to see which of these streets is actually on First Street reconstruction, if any of them, but yeah, we'll still. It's financially prudent and responsible.
Sure.
We also do have a temporary. Utilize for a short period.
Oh, that's true. The temporary speed bumps.
We have two.
We have 2 speed bumps.
We had, we clung to. Because I know we let one of those got out too.
Oh,
But I think we got that back. Okay.
I know we're over, but we didn't get to hear from Public Works on these new options. Do you have a thought?
All right, with that, let's, again, thank you, Mr. Haberman. Appreciate your time and all the work on this. And obviously we'll be discussing this as we move forward. Next up is Mr. McNeese to talk about the timeline around the board realignment. In 15 minutes.
Give or take.
We can get 20, we can still.
Yeah, Rudy mentioned to me beforehand, he was willing to donate some time to me, so. Do have a few things here. So thank you, commissioners. At the last discussion session, the commission came to an agreement on kind of how the structure. So as you all know, under our current structure of boards, five mandatory boards, we're not touching those ones because we're required to have those by state law. This is really focused on that middle box of the ones that are truly advisory. So our process for board members, maybe Sandy or Ron or whoever's running things could pull the little box up to the side so we can actually see everything on the Zoom thing. But at any rate, the current board member appointment process is in January. We determine which board members are eligible for second terms. We reach out to them and say, are you interested in serving a second term? And then which board seats are open to be filled, either with board members that are having their second term expire or ones that from the first term were not interested in serving a second term. In February, we advertise those open positions and collect resumes. In March, the commission reviews the application, fill the open seats, makes appointments that go into effect on April 1st. So currently there are 74 seats on our advisory boards. As you can see from the chart, different boards have different numbers of seats based on how the commission has made appointments and changes to said ordinances over time. And for ease of reference, I'll be using the 3-letter shorthand moving forward. So I mostly included this slide just so people could have a point of reference for what those abbreviations meant. So currently, the seats on our advisory board expire. The expiration dates are all March 31st. So just, assume that in any given year, you can see color coded wise, the blue ones will expire in 2023, the green ones in 2024, the orange ones in 2025, the red ones in 2026. This was based on when the commission made appointments to those boards and what the appointed term was for those people. I did not delve into whether these are first term or second term people, just when their current appointed terms expire. Okay, so by year, there are 24 terms that expire March 31st of 2023, 24 that expire in 2024, 22 in 2025, and 3 expiring in 2026. So before I move on, I want to say that board seats are appointed by the commission, and commissioners, because these are advisory boards in nature, commissioners can remove board members from advisory boards at any time. From the mandatory boards, that's a little bit different because of how state law governs some of those boards.
Right.
But for these boards that we're talking about, commissioners can choose to appoint or remove members at any time. Now, the transition plan that I came up with was so that anyone who had a seat could fill out the seat that they were appointed to. So I was not recommending terminating anyone's seat early. If the commission wishes to do that, the commission has the authority to do that. But I didn't feel that it was my place as assistant municipal manager to recommend that anyone's seats be terminated early. That's a decision that the commission should make. So that being said, that was the focus I was coming from putting this plan together, of trying to keep, I'll say, the commitments we made to these volunteer board members that said you're appointed for a term that ends in 2025, to say you'll be able to sit on a board through 2025. But if the commission has a desire to terminate some seats early, you have the ability to do that. Okay, so my proposed enactment and effective date. This is really small text, but I'll get through it. So basically, working off that previous notes of what the timeline is, my recommendation would be to have the ordinance become effective in April 1st of 2024. So the new ordinances would take effect then. I would advise the commission to pass the ordinance as soon as possible. So December this year, January next year, somewhere in that time frame, just so that when we advertise the seats that are available, we can advertise them honestly and say, the seats that we're going to appoint in March of 2023 are going to be for 1-year terms to fill out until the new boards take effect. Because right now we have 74 seats on our boards. My recommendation would be to have 9 seats on each of the 5 new boards. So I'll be going from 74 seats to 45 seats. So you're going to lose some people or some spots along the way. But my perspective would be just to be open and honest with people, rather than saying, rather than advertising as normal this February and saying, oh yeah, March comes around, we're going to appoint you to a seat with an expiration date of 2026. And then have this ordinance sitting in the background, and all of a sudden 2024, a year later rolls around and say, oh, no, you're off the board, you're done, we don't want you anymore. I think that would create some bad feelings. So my recommendation is just to appoint people to 1-year terms. So basically you have twice as many terms now expiring in 2024. So what would that look like? So going back to that previous diagram, where I detailed what seats expire in what years on our current boards. You can see the ones in like dark bluish gray now are all expiring in 2024. And that reduces us to many fewer seats left that were appointed to extend beyond that 2024 transition date. So the ones with the asterisk would be the 1-year terms. Like I said, I didn't break it down whether these people were in their first term or their second term, just when their current term ends. Yes. Okay.
In theory, I assume we could say either, as you said, collect resumes for a 1-year term, or those who are in the first term would go to the second term to say, would you be interested in renewing not for a full 3-year term, but for a 1-year term?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. Okay. So looking at these ones in orange and red, the kind of remaining seats, looking at those, I tried to figure out how we could transition them into the new structure. Like I said, if the commission wants to move fewer people, that's a commission decision, but my perspective I was coming from and my recommendation is built on, not ending anyone's appointed term early. So I also mentioned my recommendation is to have, that number's orange, should be 45, sorry, to have 9 seats on each board. So 9 seats on 5 boards would be 45.
Nice math.
That was some bad math on my part when I put the PowerPoint together. But basically having 9 seats would enable you to have 3-year terms for each seat and 3 seats expiring each year once we kind of fully get into things. It works out very well. I would also recommend the commission consider having 1 seat designated on each board from each ward, and then saying no more than 3 or 4 members from each ward on a given board, so that no one ward could have a majority of seats on a board. But just a recommendation for consideration, but that would kind of ensure you get some distribution throughout the municipality. So that would be sort of 5 seats specifically for an appointee from each ward, plus 4 at-large seats on all the boards. But mostly here, what I'm showing is, if you do 3-year terms with 9 seats, there's a fairly even transition of people across terms. So how do we move those people that I mentioned, that had those seats expiring after 2024, so in 25 and 26, into our new board structure? So based on what Commissioner Flynn had put together in the discussions the commission had, the Civic Engagement Board seemed well fit for the Community Relations Board members, as well as the the Sustainability and Economic Development Board seemed to be a good fit for the Economic Development Council members. The ESB members would also kind of slot into that Sustainability and Economic Development Board. The EOB members could slide up to the Civic Engagement Board as well. The Historic Preservation Board members would also slide down to the Sustainability and Economic Development Board. The Parks Advisory Board only has 1 member with a term that currently expires after 2024, so that would kind of be a natural fit with the Parks and Recreation Board. The Pension Advisory Board also only has 1 seat that exists beyond 2024, so that person could go to the Financial Management Board. The Parking Facilities Board could go to the Mobility and Transportation Board. The Sports Advisory Board has 5 seats expiring after 2024, just based on the fact that they have 13 members. And then the Traffic Board has 1 person that has a seat expiring after 2024. The other thing that I was thinking about was that we could offer them seats on these new boards, but if there was a member on a current board that had more of an interest in a different board, if there was a space available, we may be able to move them somewhere else. So for example, I know there is a person right now on the Economic Development Council. I do not know when his term expires, but there is a person on the Economic Development Council who cares a lot about mobility and transit. So if he was one of the people that had those 2025 terms and didn't want to go to the Sustainability and Economic Development Board, but would rather go to the Mobility and Transportation Board, there is space within this structure to accommodate that.
I have a quick question for Phil. So when we appoint these people during commission meetings to specific boards, these are technically different boards. Do we have an issue with moving people between boards?
No, because again, you can,
Point any time.
without saying it this directly, you can remove them and appoint them to a different board. And you could do that tonight. You could
Say
you
you're
could
done.
disband any board you wanted to.
Right.
or, replace it, recall the members with anyone.
But I guess the question is, being that they are different boards, is there a responsibility on our part to actually put a call out for applications for these boards?
That is what the ordinance says is your normal process, but it's not. It wouldn't disrupt if you did something different.
So then,
The only one you may have an issue with on your
Yes.
diagram is the one that would be full. The
Yeah.
Sustainability Economic Development, depending on what boards. they're from.
Right.
Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
and yeah, and that could be sort of transitioned over time, because the way I was envisioning this too, kind of melding the two diagrams together, was these folks' terms would still expire in the same year, so they would not be appointed to a longer term. So, you know, when we would do the new appointments in
That's right.
2024 for the new boards, you know, any of the open seats, and some of these people may say, thanks, I'm good, I don't want to transition onto a new
There's
board.
always attrition.
Right. So, you know, this may not all fill up. I would say that the new applicants for positions should get preference for the longer terms, so like the 3-year terms. And then you just kind of, when you do additional appointments to these boards, you know, the Mobility and Transportation Board works out perfectly with this alignment, because you have 3 people that move into a 1-year term, and then you can fill 2 2-year terms, 2 3-year terms, then you have that perfect rotation. The other board, it may take a few years to kind of finesse things with appointing people to a 2-year term, a 3-year term, something like that, just to kind of get everything on the cycle that I had laid out a few slides ago. But I would say in the long term, getting to, oops, sorry, I have to go back to this. Getting to this setup is the preferable option long term. It may just take a few years after 2024 for that transition to occur. So the other thing I'll say is that even though, sorry, I'm gonna fly through this. Oops. Even though we are even though my proposal is to transition people from existing boards onto the new boards, this is not necessarily guaranteeing that X number of seats on the new boards are reserved for these types of people, right? So it's not saying necessarily, well, the Parks Board is going to have 5 sports people forever. It might just be for the first year. Or it's not necessarily saying the Traffic Board is only getting 1 seat on the Mobility Board. It's just saying of the people that are left after 2024, this seemed to be the natural fits for them. But you know, it's up to the commission every time you make new appointments to boards, how you want to fill those seats that are open and what skill sets you want to appoint. You know, I'll use the library board as an example, even though that's not one of the ones we're using here. But a few years ago, the library was doing some renovation projects. They said it would be great to have an architect on our board that could help us with some of those things. So when the commission was reviewing resumes, there was a few architects that had applied. So, you know, the commission wound up appointing an architect to the library board because that was a skill set that the library wanted. So I think, you know, after the transition occurs and we really get into how this should function, that, you know, each time the commission makes new appointments, it's kind of making appointments based on the skill sets that they feel would be best for that board, not necessarily designating seats for certain purposes. This is really just moving people so that we don't have to end anyone's term early. But like I said, if the commission wants to end people's terms early, you have that option to do that.
But on that, one
Yes.
thing I really like about moving people over is that we don't have to start fresh. And I definitely learned from the DEI initiative, having to onboard almost 40 new people who have not ever served on an advisory board capacity was extremely intensive for the commissioners, intensive for our solicitor, and very, very intensive for staff to help kind of walk them through how we operate. So having some of that continuity, I think will make this more successful from day one.
And hopefully following that, what I mentioned earlier about saying, rather than picking a bunch of folks for one-year terms, do we look at who wants to redo their second three-year term and say, go one, that gets us some veteran people into the spots.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Ian, you took a very complex
Yes.
set of ideas and put it into a very succinct format. That is fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, and like I said, the commission can change certain things, but like I said, I did not feel it was my place to recommend we terminate anyone's seat early. But if the commission wants to just move a couple people over, that's your decision. And like Commissioner Randy said, that sometimes there's attrition. We may have some of these people resign their terms before this transition happens. I think the other advantage of waiting for this to go into effect till 2024 is that our current boards can use next year basically as their preparation for the transition. So they can make sure they have all their documents in order and have good file storage systems. So when the transitions happen, they can kind of pass over that institutional knowledge that happens to the new boards. So the new boards aren't just starting fresh, that there's some good ways to hand off the current work and projects that are happening to these new boards. But also in fairness to our current board members, that they have some time to prepare for what's coming and it's not just thrown on them, right? Like if we approve this now and had it go into effect in April of 2023, which the commission could do, I think that would kind of be more of a shock to the system. And then you would have to turn some people off boards because of, just how many people there would be left.
But I think this also gives commission and staff a year to, make sure that we have support so that they can operate, but it's not right. That's one of my goals is to really be as effectively resourced as possible, so that there is a governance framework based. So I like that. Out, 2 weeks in advance, right? So that again, there's just a consistent pattern, from an organizational perspective, so that again, it's not just board members, it's commissioners and staff, it's public that know kind of what these patterns are, how the meeting is governed. A lot of boards, it's just a general discussion with a little Robert's Rules of Order, and others are very structured. It's like, okay, how do we create a more consistent pattern? For these boards to create a governance process. So again, I think next year is going to be important. I think the idea of pushing to 2024 makes a lot of sense because there's a lot of preparing to do.
So next steps, we'll work on the ordinance.
So yeah, I think
Who wants to go through these?
yeah, I think we covered most of these decision points. But these are kind of the 4 high-level ones that I identified in my memo. So when the new boards take effect, it seems like they're around April. How many seats on each board? That was another open-ended thing. My recommendation was for 9, but the commission can make other decisions if you want.
I like 9. The one thing that became apparent to me as I was thinking about this was, and I mentioned it to Mr. McNeese, was there are other organizations, mostly primarily school district, that I want to make sure have a clear and consistent liaison role or a seat. However we define it, I think it's important that they have a seat at the table and they know that they have it in each of the boards. I don't know if there's other organizations, but school district is one that I think is very important to make sure we have.
And if I recall correctly, I don't remember if it was the last discussion session or the previous one when we talked about this, but one of the ideas that was kind of floated around was using the model that the Economic Development Council currently has, where they have the appointed board members that vote, but they also have a number of non-voting seats that are liaisons on that board. So they have someone, I think, from the school district, from Mount Lebanon Partnership, from the planning board, from a couple other communities, from some other community organizations that serve as a liaison to that board and kind of report back. I think if we set up that structure for the 5 new advisory boards, for each of those to have additional seats kind of below them as non-voting members, but as liaisons from other community organizations. I think that would be a really good setup to have.
Great. And then on the seats per board, I like 9 as well, and I like 1 per ward, but I'm less inclined to restrict beyond that. I know you said we can't have more than X number per ward or whatever, but I think we should just start out kind of keeping it easier to fill and then maybe add more restrictions.
The next one was how should the appointments be handled for next year? So my recommendation there was just to appoint
1
people
year.
to a 1-year term. So just so mostly so staff knows when we advertise the positions, you know, to be fair and honest with the people that we're putting it out there too. And then the last question, which seemed to get some head nods of, should the current board members with the unexpired terms, that was all those people that slid over the 25 and 26 people, should they be offered first preference of seats on the new board? So that's basically this, like, should we offer these people a chance to move over, or does the commission just want to say, no, we're going to start completely fresh and bring in 45, make everybody reapply? Or do we at least want to let these 27 people, give them sort of the right of first refusal, a chance to move over?
My instinct here is that I wouldn't automatically offer, but I would
Right.
assume that that is our preference. Knowing that in time we might change that.
Yeah.
That's
So I,
the intention, but not necessarily the rule.
Right.
you're saying.
Right.
I agree with the word preference.
Yeah.
We'll have to meet with all the candidates and so forth. And to your point earlier, it's our preference to pick those that have the
Skill sets
experience, the
needed.
skill sets and
Yeah.
experience of being on boards. There may not be someone who fits that. And great skill here doesn't quite fit in the world over here.
And I think some of these bigger boards, or when we had more boards, they were way more specific than these dense boards are. So I think we'll find that some people who join some of these boards, you know, civic engagement is bigger than some of the boards that these people are coming from, right? You know what I mean? So
Yep.
we may have people who are like, hey, this is why I joined this board, and they may just not want to do it anymore.
yeah, it's a bigger remit, which might take them out of a place where they want to be.
Right.
So yeah, no, I think that's.
And I think to Commissioner Silverman's point, what he laid out was very similar to what we do now when a board member is eligible for a second term, that, you know, there's that option that, you know, we contact them and say, are you interested in the second term? But the commission still has to actually appoint them for that second term. So sometimes there have been people on boards that the commission says, thank you for your service, but we're not interested in having you for a second term. So, you know, I didn't look at anyone's names. I was really just trying to look at positions here so that there was really no like bias involved. Like I said, I didn't even look at whether this was the end of their first term or the end of their second term. I was really just trying to look at seats. Okay, so I think that covers that. So the timeline for ordinance adoption, if everyone's on board, I know I talked with the solicitor last week and he was in the process of putting the ordinance draft together. So I would say if the commission's pretty much on board with this, that we're pretty much done with it in discussion session, that we can move it on to introducing the ordinance at the next public meeting, holding a public hearing and then adopting the ordinance, and then staff will be ready to advertise the 1-year term seats for February.
Speak now or forever hold your peace.
I like it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the ordinance is going to be a little bit more complicated than you probably think. it's
Okay.
going to be. So you may want to read it first. I mean, it's, I did talk to Ian about this.
He had animation in the presentation.
No, it's like, that was a new wrinkle for you.
It's just, because I'm not a problem advertising these things, 1-year terms and doing it now. The ordinance will be in place before March, but it's.
It'll take a little while.
I wouldn't- It's not necessary to adhere to this schedule. Do my best, but again, when you look at this, you may want to look at it.
Yeah, there's a lot of little strings tied into lots of
Yeah,
different
this is-
places.
The devil's in the details.
Yeah, like I've talked to Keith about some of the, I'll say the odd appeals, certain boards that aren't really known. I put it there.
Do we know we know for certain we've got tie-ups with parking, tie-ups with traffic. Parking related to traffic too, with the appeals and stuff like that. Like, do we have a sense of how many different ordinances we're gonna have to change? Because some of that was just policy, right?
Yeah, no,
Some was ordinance.
thinking about 5 or 6 or 7 boards are referenced in various ordinances. One of them is actually the Board of Appeals, that's the building code one. They actually show up like the swimming pools and some other things. So again, it's talk to Keith about it. We'll probably just go.
And we're not talking about changing anything related to the statutory reports, but there is a cleanup related to some of these advisory reports. a number of years ago. The direction was to have the traffic board here, traffic ticket appeals, so that'll have to transition over into the new ordinance. We will need to modify the full opportunity board ordinance to have it reflect what we want to do in terms of the transition either. So there is some, as Phil said, some back end cleanup that will have to be incorporated into the.
Like the Parks Board has some duties with trees that is, again, I don't know that they ever really exercise these.
Well, I think, honestly, I think that part of this, now that we have a clear path, this is actually going to be really interesting to kind of get into these, say, what were these things? Because I think a lot of my thinking has been, I want each of these boards to have a role that is embedded in our governance process. What that is an unknown in some circumstances. It'll be interesting to see what you pull out and say, where do you want this, or what do we do with this? Because some of them might not make sense anymore. Some of them, might be a natural pattern that we want to, either promote or expand, think about. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a good process.
Yeah, given the timeline of it's going to take some time to tease this all out, and we're kind of run out of time. Is there a way to do some sort of, I'll say, inner ordinance so that it addresses our being advertised to fill seats for 2023, even though in the kind of phase 1, phase 2, somewhere going to run out of time trying to affect this?
You can advertise today for those 1-year terms.
Doesn't matter.
Don't worry about
Not-
it.
We need the ordinance amendment.
Or, and, okay,
The ordinance
that box themselves entrance.
We have all year essentially, and so we want to start the ordinance.
Yeah.
In 2024.
Well, and like I said, I will probably get it done this week, show Keith and Ian. I like where you may want to look at it. I'm just saying that we don't want to look at it before you introduce it.
Sure. So that'll be a little press.
Good.
Good
All right.
feedback.
Awesome. Great, fantastic.
Excellent. Thank you all very much. And
We
we
just-
will keep moving forward.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
No, 26.
Got that on black.
Got it, whatever.
Yes. Where's your animation?
I don't have any. I apologize. I'm just going to read from my notes. It'll be quick and brief. So, good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. I just wanted to provide a brief update of where we are with the forestry management and invasive species control plan that was recommended by our Parks Master Plan consultant. One of the recommendations in the Parks Master Plan included the most recent in the Parks Master Plan was to hire a professional consultant to provide a forestry management and invasive species control plan. And one of the quotes that I have here from the actual plan is, due to the significant scale of park forests and the threat of invasive species establishing woodland parks and invasive species management plans is imperative for the preservation of the parks, natural resources, and for the visitors' continued safety and enjoyment. I think that's a pretty strong statement.
Yep.
And I think that's what we're ultimately, that's what our goal is with this whole project.
And just to add to my memory, we see this last year budget or some amount, right?
That's correct. Yeah, I'll get to that. There's $30,000 actually appropriated in the parks budget, the parks part of the public works budget to conduct this.
Last year. we
That's correct.
Gave it some addition, because we knew we wanted to
That's correct.
get started.
So we advertised an RFP. It was developed with the assistance from the Parks Master Plan consultant and reviewed with the Parks Advisory Board before it was put out and on the street. The original goals of the study stated in the master plan were to develop a comprehensive inventory of each park, list the current use and current maintenance strategies of each park and open space,
Also provide assessments and recommendations based on the findings of the comprehensive inventory. The assessment will include risk assessments of existing trees, notes of any diseases or insect problems, conflicts between vegetation and infrastructure, recommendations for species selection, and a maintenance plan with both short and long-term actions. I think those are all very important.
Absolutely.
It would also hope to provide management with estimated costs for future budget requests. This would also include potential funding sources, which may be grants and so forth, implementation of strategies, a monitoring plan, and cost estimates for project phase implementation. From that RFP, we received 2 proposals, and both of them met the criteria for the RFP. They were reviewed by a smaller portion of the Parks and and the 2 proposals that we received, one was from BL Companies. They have an office in Sewickley, and they submitted a proposal with an estimated cost of $161,432.50. So that one kind of right off the bat was out of our price league because our budget is $30,000. The second one that we received was from Oikos Ecology LLC. They're in Elizabeth, PA, and they provided a proposal with an estimated cost of $47,660. And I provided that proposal. Hopefully you guys got that last week in your packets, the proposal and a copy of the RFP. Oikos.
We didn't even see the other one, right?
No, we kind of kicked that one out right off
Yeah.
the bat because it's out of our price range. But after reviewing the proposals, Oikos, their principal and owner is Dr. Tim Nuttall. They recently completed several projects for the University of Pittsburgh, one for the Allegheny Land Trust in Turkville Valley Greenway, and also another project that they mentioned in the proposal at Carnegie Mellon University. Those are all very similar to the projects that we're looking to do.
Yeah. Saw that.
A few members of the Parks Advisory Board, myself and Phil Avelio met with Tim Nuttall on Teams, and he has agreed to reduce his cost of the project to not exceed $30,000. So what we are planning on doing, we're not gonna reduce the scope of the budget. Initially there were 16 parks listed, and some of the parks are very similar in how they're managed and what they have in them. So we feel that we can do a very good study for $30,000, and Dr. Nuttall did as well, by just starting with our highest priority parks and working through those. Let the Parks Advisory Board determine which parks they'd like to start with, and what we basically run on each park.
Sure.
With the assistance of the Parks Advisory Board, we will rank and prioritize the parks that are studied. Tim is confident that he can produce a good plan for the parks. This study. Some of the benefits that we'll have from this study will be it'll provide us with a guide to consistently manage the parks and open space areas. And another thing too, we'll develop guides that will focus volunteer efforts. We have a lot of volunteers and volunteer hours. It's kind of a hodgepodge of things. Some people, do things that they want to do and so forth. So with this short and long-term plan, we should be able to guide them in the right direction. That's what we're trying to accomplish. So the next steps are we plan to meet with Tim Nuttall. We decide to rank each park and which ones that we study first, and work through the list until we reach our expense limit of $30,000. So we'll see where we're at, after we get started. We're a little bit behind on the calendar right now. Initially, we had hoped to start probably about a month and a half, 2 months ago, actually, with the plan and the study. But Dr. Nuttall said it shouldn't be a problem. So we may go longer into 2023, but we're still working with the same budget. So,
I guess my question is how does their effort tie in to the comprehensive plan? Right, because this is a long-term effort.
short and long term, yes.
Right,
Absolutely.
right. So I guess, as they're working through it, probably want to feed that into Patrick.
I really didn't look at it from that perspective. I was looking at it more from the Parks Master Plan recommendations and fulfilling those goals that came along with
If
that.
you went into the park, I could make this up for me and my hyperbole, and every tree was dead, and we needed a soccer field. I decided to say, okay, get rid of them all, put it in a soccer field, so tie it right into the comprehensive plan. So I think it will feed in well, get a lot of information.
And I think it's going to help us to manage what we actually have, you know,
Yeah, I think
it
so
will
too.
help us with our efficiencies and also, you know, everybody's going to have input on this as well,
Mhm.
from the Parks Board and so forth, the community. And it'll feel like a team effort, you know, when we finally get to doing something, it's going to be a team effort and everybody's kind of on
Great.
board.
Like, it'll be more specific. It'll be things
Yeah.
like, if I understand, like, we have so much honeysuckle and vines that are killing our trees right now, and there's
Right.
different approaches to how to manage that. This will give us an expert approach on how to really manage that and what that'll
Right.
cost.
Right.
Yeah, that's
I
my
feel like, yeah, like provide guidance and structure, the guidance of
Yeah.
how do we address honeysuckle, and some structure to say,
Yeah.
how do we do it? You know, so it's good, give some
Yeah.
structure.
Yeah, and this guy has experience with that too. He's seen things that work. You know, we have some experience as well. I mean, he actually is pretty excited to come out here because we're ahead of the curve with a lot of other communities, you know,
Yeah,
from what we've
sure.
been doing. And I'll be honest, you know, most of it's been volunteer effort. I mean, we
Yeah.
really don't have a lot of extra resources with our staff to devote to invasive controls. That's just one of those things that, you know, do you fix potholes and patch curbs and sidewalks, or do you go and cut vines? So, you know, naturally, you're gonna do the thing that is more, I don't want to say
Visible.
important, but yeah, visible and
Immediate.
potentially
Yeah,
hazardous.
tree
Potentially
down the
hazardous,
road.
right?
My goal at the end of this is to have a nice packet where we can give those volunteers after we approve who they are and say, this is how we manage this. You want, you want to do tree planting? Okay, but you also have to
Or invasive
prepare the
control,
site, do
right?
invasive control first, do invasive control for the next 5 years to manage it.
And it'll mesh with our efforts too, because, you know, even contractually, we hire folks that do chemical controls and so forth, which you have to have that as part of your program. It's not your whole program, but it's part of the program. So with any kind of integrated pest management, there's always a chemical component to that
Yeah.
that you have, or the things are just going to come back and sometimes even stronger than before you started. So that's all part of it, but you have to use those judiciously and make sure that you're using them in the right way in order to gain control over that. So we really, I mean, I'm pretty happy and impressed with some of the results that we've had at Twin Hills Park. You know, yeah,
Conservancy especially.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Phil gets a lot of credit too. Phil
Yeah.
is on top of a lot of the stuff. Here's the board members and also the contractors that we have. So there's no way that I could devote as much time as Phil does to what he does in the field. So I'm sure he definitely needs kudos for that.
Mr. Grill, I cut you off, sorry.
No, we're good.
I was just gonna add in on the comprehensive plan, since we did the Parks Master Plan in advance of the comprehensive plan, that the comp plan consultants are kind of using the Parks Plan as a jumping off point for a lot of these things. And we've heard back in our community surveys that we've done so far that maintenance and upkeep of our parks and recreation assets is very important to the community. Actually, in the current survey, which has over 1,600 responses, the question of, you know, what should Mount Lebanon focus most heavily on in the next 10 years? Maintenance of parks and rec facilities is the #1 answer. So I think it all feeds in together to each other.
Well, I think transitioning into the boards too, the consolidation of the boards is going to help too, because we're going to have kind of a game plan or a manual, if you will, to hand off to that board that will be
Yeah.
making those decisions as well.
Well, as I always go back to, and you guys probably get tired of here, you're hearing me say this. Yeah, for me, this is a long-term capacity question, right? These, especially the passive parks, right? They are passive. We don't do much with them. And the reality is you don't have capacity to do much with them. So if we have a long-term plan, it gives us at least a line of sight as to what the delta is that we need to be thinking about, whether that's built by volunteers or, you know, or by
Contractors in-house.
contractors, right? However that gets filled, at least there's a line of sight as to, you know, we're no longer passively managing these parks, or actually just passively watching these parks. We might be
Right.
passively managing them
Right.
proactively to say this is space that we are managing to be treated as a passive space.
Right.
Which is fundamentally different than where we are now. And I think that's, for me, that's what's important. If this helps us get there,
Yeah.
I'm on board.
And there's
Early
different
30,000.
theories. There's different theories to management too. Do you because a space is gone, do you just leave it go? Or then do you waste the efforts of trying to recover that? Or do you focus on the areas that are a little bit better and just have a little bit of invasive, you know? So that's a decision point as well. So,
That's triage.
right,
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For this heavy lift.
thank you.
Thanks, Rudy.
Thank you.
All right, it is 7:55, so we will go to the IDA meeting. We are going to skip over boards of authorities. So I will call the Industrial Development Authority meeting for November 8th, 2022 to order. Item number 2 on the agenda, Commissioner Rani, please.
Didn't grab it. Hold on, let me get my idea out. You got one right there for me? Thank you. All right, consideration of the minutes from the meeting held August 9th, 2022. I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Seconded, all those in favor? Aye.
Staying, I wasn't there.
Thank you. Item number 3, do we have any public comment this evening on the Industrial Development Authority? None online, none in person.
Industrial Development.
Industrial Development Authority.
Not, yeah, not. You just said, sure, okay. Pardon me. If you want to give public comment, go ahead and say what's going now.
Yeah, in the commission chamber.
It's right from there, that room. They'll do it. Thank you, Rob.
All right, item number 4 on the agenda, Mr. McGill.
Thank you, Mr. President. The IDA meeting scheduled for 2023 is as follows: February 14th, yes, that's Valentine's Day. May 9th, August 8th, and November 14th. For the period since the last meeting, there were no new borrowings, and the balance sheet is essentially unchanged from the last meeting because of that.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. McGill. Item number 5, Commissioner Silverman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Appointment to Mount Lebanon Industrial Authority, ITA. On April 24th, 2006, the Mount Lebanon Commission adopted resolution number R-9-06 to create the IDA and appoint the commissioners as additional members of the board for staggered 5-year terms. As commissioners have left, the replacements have been appointed to fill the unexpired terms. Commissioner Foster's term is expiring. The terms of the incumbent members are Mindy Rainey, April 30th, 2023. Her term will expire. Andrew Flynn, his term will expire April 30th, 2024. Greg Rella to expire April 30th, 2025. Me, April 30th, 2026. I move to make the following appointment of Anna Swagger Wilson for a term expiring April 30th, 2027.
Moving seconded, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. That we are adjourned.
Well,
And we have 4 minutes.
Oh.
Yes, break before being papers. Thank you, everybody. We will see you next.